You feel the pain first, sharp, sudden, spreading fast. Your hand flies to your leg and it comes back red. Warm, too warm for this frozen place. The wind howls, your breath fogs. The snow beneath you stains dark. And then you realize you're in the ice age. No paramedics, no hospitals, no antiseptic, no chance to just walk it off. The wound could kill you, but it doesn't have to. Because your people, they know things. They've done this before. In caves where fire flickers and bones whisper secrets, they've learned how to mend skin, stop infection, ease pain. They've made medicine without science, surgery without tools, survival without textbooks. But how? What did they know, and how did they know it? This is the story of Ice Age medicine, of ancient clinics made from mammoth bone and ash, of wounds stitched with sinew and disinfected with snow. You're not a spectator here, you're the patient. And your life depends on what happens next. The cold is what breaks you. It's not the hunger or the weight of the kill on your shoulders. It's the slip, that moment when the edge of your own axe kisses your thigh instead of the bone you meant to split. 1 second of distraction, one half step on ice, and suddenly warmth spills down your leg in a place that should never feel warm. You freeze, but not from the cold. You look down. You already know. The blood is dark. It pulses. And in the silence that follows, your mind flashes through things you can't name but deeply understand. Infection, weakness, the scent of blood attracting wolves. You've seen it before, the way a small wound can unmake a strong body. This world doesn't leave space for mistakes. Your people survive not because they are perfect, but because they prepare for what happens when they're not. You stumble back toward camp, legs stiffening, snow turning pink behind you. Each step is harder than the last. The cold is cruel, but it's honest. It doesn't hide what's coming. You feel the blood crusting at the edge of torn hide. You feel the air bite into the rawness of exposed flesh. You don't have hours. You might not even have one. And then you see the smoke, the firelight that marks safety, or at least the closest thing to it. Eyes widen as you return, not in panic, not in fear, but in readiness. A few glance at your leg, one looks away. The rest move fast without speech as though they've done this before, because they have. You're lowered beside the hearth, stones still warm from a long burning flame. The animal skins that cover the entrance are pulled tight to shut out the wind. And then, you wait, not alone. The fire crackles beside you, casting shadows that move like ancestors on the walls. Somewhere behind those skins, the healer has already been called. Your pulse echoes in your ears and your throat in the place where the wound blooms. It's not just pain, it's memory, adrenaline, fear. Not of dying. You've made peace with that, but of suffering without meaning. Of being too weak to walk, too slow to hunt, too heavy to carry. You know what happens to the ones who can't keep up. But the healer enters with no trace of doubt, just stillness. You don't understand what she says. There are no long explanations, no promises, just hands steady and practiced, reaching for your wound. She smells like smoke and something bitter, roots crushed in hide bowls. She touches the skin around the gash and you flinch. Her face doesn't change. You've seen her before, speaking to spirits when the meat ran out, whispering to trees before storms came. But this is different. She's not here to talk. She's here to listen. Not to you, but to the wound itself. To its temperature, its rhythm, its refusal to clot. Her fingers press and release, press and release. You try not to move. The pain is bright now, almost holy. It strips away everything that doesn't matter. You barely notice the others. But they're there, sharpening bone tools, boiling water, grinding plant matter into a thick green paste. Not a single question is asked. They've seen injuries like this before. Not exactly the same, but close enough. They know what comes next. The wound will try to kill you in one of three ways. First, it will bleed you dry. Second, it will let rot seep in. Third, it will make you slow. And here, slow is a death sentence. The healer doesn't say this. She doesn't need to. Her eyes say it all. So do the scars on her arms and the way she moves like someone who's stitched more skin than meat. You wonder, how did they learn all this? Who was the first to press snow against torn flesh and realize the bleeding slowed? Who saw mold creeping on food and dared to smear it on a wound? Who stayed alive long enough after breaking a bone to teach the next generation how to set it? None of it comes from books. It comes from memory. Pain remembered, shared, whispered beside firelight over generations. You are the latest chapter in a story written in blood and smoke. And as the healer prepares, grinding, burning, sewing, wrapping, you can't help but think, this isn't just a wound, it's a test of her skill, of your body, of the tribe's will to carry one more mouth through the winter. If you survive, it won't be luck, it'll be knowledge. And knowledge here is as sacred as warmth. Outside, the night closes in. The wolves begin their song. Somewhere far off, something cracks in the forest. But here, beneath stone walls and firelight, the work has begun. It will take everything: herbs that bite like acid, smoke that blinds, heat that seals skin shut. You may scream. You may faint. You may not walk again. But you've made it this far. And your people, they don't let go easily. Still, a question hangs over the fire like smoke that refuses to leave. A question you're not ready to ask out loud. Will it be enough? Because out here, even ancient knowledge has its limits. And sometimes the Ice Age doesn't forgive. But before we heal, we must understand what it is we're fighting. And that means going deeper, not just into the wound, but into the body itself. The signs it gives, the language it speaks, the meanings it once had before medicine had names. You groan through clenched teeth, the ache in your leg rising with every heartbeat. The wound throbs like a second pulse, a rhythm pounding louder than thought. Someone places a hand on your forehead, calloused, warm, steady. They don't ask if you feel worse. They already know. They watch the tremble of your lips, the sweat collecting above your brow even in this freezing air. They notice the twitch in your leg when the pain tightens, not just where it bleeds, but along the line of muscle far above it. These aren't random signs. To them, your body is speaking, loudly, urgently, and they know how to listen. But there is no word for infection, no concept of white blood cells or cytokine storms, no language that explains bacteria swarming unseen beneath your skin. Still, your people understand, because long before medicine had names, it had patterns. Patterns that could be touched, smelled, heard if you paid attention. The healer leans close and breathes in, not just to check if you're alive, but to smell the wound. Rot has a scent. Sweet, wrong, dangerous. It rises before the skin even changes color. And they know that scent like they know the first signs of frost, unmistakable, unforgiving. You see them press their ear to your chest. Their eyes close, not in ceremony but concentration. They're listening to the breath, fast or shallow, wet or dry. Does it rattle, stutter? These aren't metaphors to them. These are signs. You are a map and they are reading the terrain without ever opening you up. Because opening the body is a step few take. It is taboo, sacred, maybe even forbidden. A body in death must be treated with reverence, its secrets buried, not exposed. So instead, they've learned to listen while you're still breathing, and they've done it over generations. Think of how many thousands fell before you. Hunters gored by mammoths, children burned by fire, women torn in childbirth. Every wound was a teacher, every death a lesson, not always understood in the moment, but remembered, passed on, murmured beside the hearth. Don't ignore swelling. Don't cool a fever too quickly. Don't let a wound fester in silence. You wince as the healer's hand presses the skin around your leg. It's hot to the touch, not just surface heat, deeper, thicker, and that tells them something. Not just that there's pain, but that the body is fighting. Fever isn't the enemy, it's a signal. Swelling means heat. Heat means danger. Danger means imbalance. These aren't wild guesses. They're systems of meaning built through centuries of touch and trial. There's no stethoscope, but they know your heart is racing. There's no thermometer, but your burning skin tells them enough. There's no microscope, but your smell betrays what lives beneath the wound. And your eyes, even your pupils, tell stories if you know how to read them. They watch your shivering, the uneven tension in your limbs, the way you stop breathing just for a second when the pain spikes. Each sign adds another thread to the tapestry, until finally they can say, without saying, what is wrong. Because pain in your world is not just suffering, it is information. You do numb it. You listen to it. You learn where it travels, how it moves, how it changes with touch or time. And from that, a diagnosis is born. It's a kind of science, though the word doesn't exist yet. A body-based empiricism. You feel, you observe, you remember. And over time, experience becomes intuition. Even children begin to learn it early. They're taught to feel for swelling in joints, to watch for red streaks on the skin, a warning of deeper infection, to smell a wound that smells wrong, not in chemical terms but human ones, sour, putrid, sharp like fermented roots gone bad. And over time, this language of the body becomes second nature, not through school or scrolls, but through touch, through repeated exposure to suffering not as cruelty but as necessity. There is no shame in pain here, no hiding it behind stoicism or pride, because the sooner you show it, the sooner others can read it. Pain is communal, diagnosis is collaborative, healing is never solo. And it goes deeper than just flesh. They've noticed things that modern science would take millennia to rediscover, that certain pains radiate, that a strike to the gut might tighten the chest, that certain fevers come with dreams, visions, trembling, that trauma changes how the body walks, even long after the wound is gone. Some healers even speak of invisible arrows, not literal ones, but forces that strike from within. The idea that something in you can be out of place, Not just a broken bone, but a disturbed balance. Maybe not far from the idea of an organ, even if they never cut to see one. How did they figure it out? Because they paid attention. When someone with chest pain coughed blood and died, they remembered. When a woman bled after childbirth and never stopped, they whispered the warning to others. When someone broke a bone and the limb twisted wrong forever, they didn't just mourn, they studied. And when someone lived despite the odds, they didn't call it magic. They traced the steps. What was done differently? What root was used? What prayer was spoken? Which healer was present? That's how a system grew. Not one based on anatomy, but on pattern, on response, on outcomes. On what the body tells you if you learn to listen hard enough. You lie beside the fire, leg burning, vision blurring. You can't speak of microbes or cellular inflammation, but you feel that something inside you is at war. And the people tending to you, they know that feeling too, not just in theory, but in their bones. Because they've lost people to it, and they've saved some from it. And that difference is the only reason you're still breathing. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to survive the next wave. Outside, the wind howls over snow. Inside, someone checks your pulse again, not to count, but to feel its rhythm. Still strong, still fast. For now. But what happens next isn't just about the body. It's about the things they use to fight with, the tools, the herbs, the strange substances that shouldn't work but somehow do. And the question becomes louder now. How did they know which things healed and which things killed? Your leg throbs and pulses, but that pain, as sharp and immediate as it is far from unique. Around this fire, through this cold in this time, injuries like yours are not accidents. They are expected. They are inevitable. You're not the first to bleed into the snow, not even today. Because the ice age is not gentle. It's not made for soft bodies. Out here, you live by bone and muscle, and both can betray you in an instant. A mammoth tusk can puncture a lung before you even see it coming. A slip on frost-slick stone can twist your ankle, then snap your leg in two. A single misstep during a hunt means torn ligaments, shattered ribs, or worse. A wound too deep to sew, too wide to survive. But somehow some did survive, and the bones tell their story. You wouldn't know it in the moment, lying still, clutching your wound, but long after the flesh disappears, your skeleton remembers. Archaeologists have found those memories buried in soil and ice. A thigh bone fused after a compound fracture, a skull healed from blunt trauma, a pelvis reshaped after childbirth nearly tore it in half. These aren't just bones. They are proof of survival. Imagine what it took to heal those injuries. No stitches, no scalpels, no morphine. Just firelight, flint tools, animal sinew, and hands that refuse to let go. But first, you have to understand what kinds of injuries haunted your people and what they meant. Start with the breaks. Bones shattered by falls, crushed by rock slides, snapped during mammoth hunts. Spiral fractures in arms, signs that someone twisted while bracing against impact. Crushed ribs, broken collarbones, caved-in skulls. And sometimes the fracture isn't clean, the bone bursts through skin. A compound fracture, a sight that even today makes surgeons flinch. And yet Ice Age skeletons show healing, crooked but healed. which means someone kept the limb still, aligned it, bound it, protected it from infection, carried the injured through months of food scarcity. That's not just care, that's commitment. Then come the cuts. Gashes from stone blades, tusk punctures, antler wounds. Deep lacerations that sliced muscle and tendon, sometimes down to bone. And not all of them came from hunting. Some were human-made scars from conflict, competition, or punishment. You know this because some skeletons show blade marks that didn't kill, just maimed. A warning, perhaps, or a defense. And there are burns. In a world of open flame and freezing nights, fire is salvation and danger. Children rolled too close in their sleep. Hunters scorched while cooking meat. Women burned during childbirth rituals involving hot stones or steaming water. The skin blisters, chars, and sloughs away. No antiseptic, no bandages, just soot, pain, and whatever roots numbed the skin long enough to matter. But pain was only part of the story. Some wounds didn't come from the outside. Some built up quietly inside the body. Take abscesses, deep infections beneath the skin, often near the jaw or spine. Traces show up on skulls, pitted bone eaten away from within, teeth rotting down to the root, a jawbone swollen with infection so bad it deformed the face. Without antibiotics, this could kill you slowly or drive you mad with pain. Or childbirth. It wasn't just a miracle, it was a gamble. Skeletons of women with fractured pelvises, torn spines, or bobbies still inside them tell a brutal truth. Not everyone made it. Narrow hips, breech births, hemorrhaging. Even when mother and child survived, many bore lasting trauma, limps, misaligned hips, chronic pain. The body keeps score, and in bones, nothing is ever truly forgotten. Then there were animal attacks. Wolves, cave lions, bears. Their bites left distinctive marks, deep punctures, shearing fractures. One skull showed signs of a bear bite to the cranium, not survivable. But another skeleton, with deep claw marks across the ribcage, showed signs of healing. That means someone survived. Someone was pulled back from death's teeth. And all of it raises the same question: how? Because these weren't just freak accidents. They were common, expected. When survival depends on spears and cliffs and ice, danger is everywhere. A single misstep could turn into a saga of recovery or a funeral pyre. But Ice Age people didn't surrender to pain. They responded to it, and the evidence is in their skeletons. Forensic anthropology confirms it. Around 40% of adult remains from Upper Paleolithic Europe show evidence of skeletal trauma. That's not a small number. That's nearly half of all adults studied, walking, breathing testaments to pain endured and overcome. Some injuries healed clean. Others left deformities, twisted legs, fused joints, curved spines. These people didn't just survive. They lived with injury. They hunted, moved, even raised children with permanent damage. Because in a small group, no one is disposable. You adapt. You endure. And you, lying beside the fire with your torn leg, are now part of that lineage. Your pain isn't a private burden. It's communal. Everyone has a role in your recovery because your survival protects theirs. You carry food when they can't. You guard the fire when others sleep. One lost body means one more gap in the chain of survival. So they treat you, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And the healer, she's not just working from instinct. She's working from memory, from a living catalog of every bleeding, broken, burned soul who came before you. What happens next is survival, yes, but it's also legacy. Because each treatment adds to the story. And soon, you'll learn what they used to treat the untreatable, the plants, the fungi, the animal parts twisted into poultices and pastes. But first you have to ask, where did this knowledge come from? Because no one taught it in a classroom. So who was the first to look at a root and say, this might heal us? She arrives without ceremony, yet everything changes the moment she kneels beside you. She doesn't wear feathers or paint. There are no chants echoing off cave walls. And yet, the silence around her feels deeper, as if the camp itself shifts to make room for what she carries not in her hands but in her memory. She is not a priest, though she knows the rites of birth and burial. She is not a doctor, though she knows where to cut, when to stitch, and how to keep death waiting. She is something older, a different kind of authority, one whose power is neither divine nor clinical, but drawn from something both fragile and vast, experience. You watch as she sets down a bundle of leather and fur, filled with powders, leaves, roots, tools made of bone and flint. Her fingers, wrinkled and stained from years of preparation, move with instinct. She's done this before, many times. Still, this moment is not just about you. It's about her and who she represents. Because she is not the exception. Across Ice Age Europe and beyond, someone like her existed in nearly every camp. Often a woman, often old, sometimes feared, sometimes revered, but always essential, not for what she believed, but for what she remembered. She touches the skin near your wound gently. Her eyes don't flinch at the pus, the blood, the swelling. She's seen worse, and she knows what's coming next, not just the pain, but the fever, the hunger, the hallucinations. Your body has already begun its war. Her job is not to win it for you, but to keep you alive long enough to try. So who is she? She is the first healer. Not the first in history, perhaps, but the first in your memory, and the first in a lineage that stretches back tens of thousands of years. Anthropologists have found signs of her kind, even if they never left names. In cave burials, they've uncovered skeletons with elaborate grave goods, tools, pigments, medicinal plants, not just symbols of status, but indicators of role. A woman in the Dolny Vestanis site in modern-day Czechia was buried with fox teeth, mammoth ivory, and red ochre carefully arranged around her, her bones twisted by disease, but her death treated with great honor. Some believe she was a shaman, others a healer, maybe both. Because in this world, those two roles are often intertwined. Healing, after all, isn't just physical. It's emotional, spiritual. When the pain goes deep, when fever brings visions or trauma lingers after a violent hunt, the healer must reach further than the wound. She must see things others cannot. Not because she's magical, but because she's trained her attention to levels few others can tolerate. She notices the tremor in your voice, the way you hold your breath before pain returns, the color of your tongue, the rhythm of your dreams. And where did she learn this? Not from books, from blood. She watched her own mother treat wounds by firelight. She helped hold down a cousin as they amputated a rotting toe. She gathered herbs, tasted bark, listened to stories whispered by elders who once saw a man survive a wound no one believed possible. Knowledge passes hand to hand here, from lips to ears, through the intimacy of memory. It is often women who carry it, because they are the ones who stay close to the fire, to the children, the sick, the wounded. They notice what others don't. When fever breaks, when swelling recedes, when a baby survives a difficult birth because of a certain root boiled in mammoth milk. But it's not just women. Some healers are men, especially older ones, those no longer hunting. Some are shamans, drawn toward healing by visions or strange insights. Some are simply the survivors of injury themselves, people who have lived through agony and come out the other side with knowledge that demands to be shared. Because to heal someone in this world is not just to help them. It is to hold their survival inside you and carry it to the next person who needs it. And society knows this. The wounded in Ice Age groups were not always abandoned. In fact, many were valued, cared for, fed, carried, protected because they were walking reminders of how knowledge could save a life. Their healing became community memory. Archaeological evidence proves it. Take the man from Shanidar Cave in Iraq, 45,000 years old. He had a crushed arm, a withered leg, and a blind eye. And yet he lived well into adulthood. Someone tended him, fed him, gave him meaning. He wasn't discarded, he was held. Why? Because his life meant something. Because healing wasn't just a biological repair, it was a social bond. If your people healed you, then you owed them your survival, your story, your care for the next one to fall. And the healer, she holds all those stories. She doesn't speak much, but she watches everything. She knows that a broken leg heals slower in the cold, that a burn festers faster near stagnant water, that a new moon is the best time to apply certain poultices, not because of mysticism, but because that's when the night is darkest and sleep is deepest, and dreams are strong enough to carry pain away. You try to speak, but your throat is dry. She lifts a bone spoon to your lips. A liquid bitter and earthy slides down. Some root extract, you think, something numbing, but maybe more than that. Her eyes meet yours, not kindly, not cruelly, just honestly. She's seen this before. And she'll see it again. What she knows cannot be written. It can only be lived, passed from scar to scar. And when she's gone, when the fire dims and her voice fades, someone else will step into her place. Another girl watching closely. Another boy remembering where she pressed and what she whispered. The chain continues. Because in this world, healing isn't a profession. It's a legacy. And now, as your body begins to respond to the bitter mixture, and your pain starts to shift, not vanish, but change, you feel it. You are being held in something larger than yourself. Not a system, not a faith. A memory, a live, breathing human. But what exactly is in that mixture she gave you? Because the next question is no longer who heals. It's how. And the answer lies in the ancient pharmacopoeia of the Ice Age. The leaves, stones, molds, mushrooms, and the rituals behind them. She leaves before dawn. The frost still clings to the grass, brittle and white, and the wind howls like it remembers every death that ever passed through these hills. But she walks into it without hesitation, a leather pouch at her waist, her eyes low to the ground. She's not searching blindly. She's following memory. Because the cure doesn't live by the fire, it grows far from the safety of camp, in cold, shadowed gullies, between stones slick with lichen, buried beneath snow that must be brushed away with fingers already stiff from the cold. You lie back near the flames, fever curling through your body, and try not to shiver. She said she would return by dusk. But until then, your survival is out there, rooted in bark and bone and bitter leaves you've never tasted. And somehow she'll find it. The healer walks a world alive with information. To you, it might look like chaos, trees, moss, mud, ice, but to her it's a pharmacy. One mapped not with words or drawings, but with pain. She remembers which plants stopped her cousin's bleeding, which ones made her mother vomit until her fever broke, which ones killed, and which ones almost killed before someone found the right dose. This isn't instinct, it's inheritance, a library written in scars and recoveries. Yarrow, she's searching for yarrow. It grows low, pale green with delicate white blossoms, but in winter it hides. Still, she knows where to look. Between the rocks where the sun strikes first. It's not beautiful, it's useful. Yarrow slows bleeding. Its leaves contain alkaloids that constrict blood vessels, a natural coagulant. Not that she knows the word, of course, but she knows what it does. She plucks it, wraps it in bark, and keeps moving. Next, willow bark. She strips it from young, supple trees near the riverbank. Bitter, papery. But within that bitterness is salvation, salicin, the compound that would one day become aspirin. It reduces pain, lowers fever, calms inflammation. She doesn't know chemistry, but she knows suffering, and how this bark quiets it. Then moss, soft and green, sponge-like, not for pain but for dressing. It absorbs blood, holds warmth, and if chosen correctly, resists infection. Sphagnum moss especially carries a subtle acidity, a natural antiseptic. In centuries to come, it will be packed into soldiers. Wounds in World War I, but here now it rests inside her pouch, waiting to press against your leg. Somewhere along the way, she gathers a lichen that smells faintly sweet and sharp. It's not for you, not today. It's for the cough another child has. But she keeps it close, because healing is never just one thing at a time. And in her other hand, a handful of snow. Not for numbing, though it helps with that, but for cleansing. In a world before boiling water, ice is the cleanest thing there is. A primitive sterilizer. It numbs. It shrinks swelling. And perhaps most importantly, it gives her time, a few precious minutes before rot can begin. Back at the camp, your body burns. The wound has darkened at the edges and your breath comes in shallow waves. Someone checks your forehead. You are hot, too hot. But then she returns. She kneels by your side once more, and this time her hands are not empty. First, she unwraps the moss and presses it gently to the wound. You flinch. It's cold but not cruel. You can feel it drawing the blood away, holding it like a second skin. Then the yarrow, crushed into a coarse paste between two stones. She packs it in carefully, murmuring words not for magic, but for steadiness, a rhythm she's learned calms both the patient and the healer. The smell is sharp, earthy, bitter. Then comes the willow bark boiled over the fire into a bitter tea. You drink it, wincing at the taste. But soon the ache dulls. Not gone, not forgotten, but manageable, like distance between you and the worst of the pain. You wonder, how did she know? How many people died before someone realized that a certain bark cooled a fever? How many mothers lost children before someone noticed that packing moss slowed bleeding better than fur? How many fingers turned black before someone learned which snow was clean and which carried sickness from upstream? Trial, error, memory. She doesn't think of it as medicine. There's no distinction, really, between healing and surviving, between knowing a plant and being part of a world that demands you know it. And yet, what she practices is chemistry in disguise. Phytochemistry, the science of plants, of tannins that shrink tissue, of salicylates that quiet nerves, of alkaloids that kill parasites and dull pain. Every leaf she gathers contains molecules, invisible, yes, but powerful. Evolution built them to protect the plant. She repurposed them to protect you. Some roots numb the skin. Others purge the gut. Some, like mold scraped from rotting bark, kill unseen enemies, bacteria. Penicillium, though she does not name it, has likely touched wounds like yours for generations, long before microscopes, long before medicine had a face. She wraps your leg in hide. Not tightly, she knows to let it breathe. Then places warmed stones near your feet to keep your blood moving. Her work is not finished, but it is begun. Outside, snow begins to fall. Inside, your pain slips into something else. Not peace, but possibility. You are not healed, not yet. But you are held in a web of choices, in the language of roots and leaves, in the legacy of every hand that ever reached into the wild and came back with hope. And as sleep begins to pull you under, one thought rises above the haze. If they knew so much, if they could do all this without microscopes or machines, then what else did they know about the body? Because next comes something stranger. A knowledge not rooted in the physical, but in dreams, breath, and altered states. Not just how to treat pain, but how to enter it. The bleeding has slowed, but it hasn't stopped. Each pulse still pushes a thin ribbon of scarlet through the moss, soaking the hide beneath your thigh. The healer studies the seepage, pinches the edges of torn flesh together, and frowns. A poultice will not be enough. You need closure, literal, swift, decisive, or everything they have done so far will unravel with the next rush of blood. There is no thread, no steel, no curved surgical needle polished by industry. Yet she rises, walks to the rack of drying meat, and slices free a strip of deer tendon that glistens with cold fat. With practiced fingers she splits it, rolls it, twists it into something startlingly thin and startlingly strong. A makeshift suture that will shrink and harden as it dries, pulling your skin together like the lacing of a boot. You want to ask how many times she has done this. Your mouth won't form the words. Fever clogs your tongue. but your eyes follow her every movement. The way she warms the sinew over steam to soften it, the way she rubs it with a smear of resin rich in sticky tannins, the way she tests it against her own palm, tugging hard until it sings with tension. When she is satisfied, she sets it aside and reaches for the awl. The tool is primitive only at first glance, a shard of reindeer antler, polished and bored to a wickedly fine point. A groove runs down one flank where resin and ash have fused into a dark line, the memory of earlier fires, earlier wounds, earlier lives held shut by this very spike. She lifts it into flame just long enough for the tip to glow, then plunges it into snow, quenching it with a hiss. The shock tightens the molecular lattice, makes the point sharper than before, and scours away whatever invisible things tried to cling there. Fire for purity, ice for precision. Over and over, the Ice Age proves that opposites are partners when survival is at stake. They pin your shoulders. Two hunters, gentle but immovable, brace your arms. Another settles at your ankles. You feel their weight, hear their breathing, smell the musk of furs warmed by bodies that have known too many nights like this. Somewhere above you the healer hums, a low vibrating note that syncs with the drumbeat of your heart, maybe for your comfort, maybe for hers. Then pain. The awl pierces one edge of the gash and tunnels outward, emerging where healthy skin still blooms pale and cold. The tendon suture follows, threaded through the hole with the blunt end first, pulled until a short tail remains. Again the awl, again the tendon, crossing the wound in a zigzag. Your vision narrows to a tunnel of sparks and roaring blood. You think you might faint. Someone slides a stick between your teeth, bark rough against your tongue. Halfway through you realize the healer is not merely closing flesh. She is aligning deeper tissues, matching muscle to muscle, fascia to fascia. If she fails, you'll heal puckered and weak. If she succeeds, you will walk again, maybe even run. A tiny adjustment of millimeters becomes the margin between hunter and burden. When at last the final stitch is drawn, she knots the tendon, cuts the ends short with a flake of obsidian, and presses a lump of beeswax into the knot to seal it from moisture. The wax hisses softly where your heat meets its chill. The worst is over, you think, until she lifts a sliver of heated flint and lowers it toward the seam. Cauterization. A hiss, a sizzle. The smell of singed hair, charred skin, and something deeper, protein undone by flame, rolls through the cave. You convulse, but hands hold you firm. The brief burst of agony seals tiny capillaries, locks the knot beneath a sheen of blackened crust. Infection has just lost one entrance. It will search for another. That is the intimate brutality of Ice Age surgery. Trade one kind of pain for another, lesser one. Trade a single terrible moment for the promise of many painless dawns. You drift in and out, catching fragments of murmured conversation. Someone mentions the man whose arm was crushed beneath a limestone slab last winter. The healer amputated at the elbow with a cleaver of flint, packed the stump in snow and resin, stitched sinew to skin. He lived, still throws spears with his remaining hand. Another voice recalls a woman struck on the crown by a falling branch. Blood seeped from her ear, and days later she raved with spirits no one else could see. The healer drilled a small hole in her skull, trepanation, a controlled release. The pressure eased. The woman lived long enough to birth 2 children who now sleep against the far wall. The bones agree with these stories. Archaeologists in distant futures will find crania with neat circular plugs missing, edges rounded by regrowth, proof that the patient did not die on the table. They will find femurs reknit after savage breaks, vertebrae fused by hands that understood traction long before the word existed, and heel bones carved down to remove necrotic tissue, leaving the owner able to hobble onward for years. Modern scholars will write papers about rudimentary orthopedics and prodoneurosurgery. But here, tonight, under flickering light, none of it feels rudimentary. It feels immediate, desperate, and astonishingly precise. The healer smears the length of the suture line with a paste of crushed garlic and bare fat, a pungent shield against rot. Allicin in the garlic will kill what the flame missed. The fat will repel water and soften the scar as it forms. She wraps the wound in strips of rabbit hide, fur facing out to wick away moisture, skin side in to cradle warmth. Then she sets 2 horn splints along your thigh and binds them with rawhide, keeping bone and muscle from shifting while the tendon shrinks and the edges knit. Only when she is done does she look at you fully, eyes reflecting both fire, light, and exhaustion. Her silence is not indifference. It is the gravity of someone who has gambled with death and for the moment believes she has won. But victory is provisional, she knows it, you feel it. The cave hums with it, because surgery is only the first battle. The real war begins unseen, microscopic, relentless. If pus blooms or fever climbs, everything she has done will unravel. The sinew will loosen, the flesh will rot, the wolves outside will smell weakness. Hands release your shoulders, the stick slips from your teeth. You taste blood, wood, ash. Yet beneath it all is something else, the faint metallic sweetness of survival. Not guaranteed, never that, but possible. And possibility has its own flavor. The healer presses 2 fingers to the pulse in your neck, counts silently, nods once. She turns to the others, points to the water pot, the herb bundle, the fire. Orders without words. Keep him warm, keep the bandages dry, keep watch for tremors, discoloration, delirium. She leaves nothing to chance because chance is merciless. You drift toward sleep. But before darkness swallows the edges of the cave, one thought pierces through. You have been sewn together with tendon, sealed with flame, wrapped in bone. Yet what might kill you now is smaller than sight, lighter than air, hidden in every breath you draw. And that truth waits in the shadows, sharpening its teeth for nightfall. The invisible killer called infection, which respects no stitch and obeys no fire. At first you think it's just exhaustion, the dizziness, the dull ache behind your eyes, the chill that clings even when you're wrapped in every fur the camp can spare. But then your skin begins to sweat while your hands go cold. Your mouth dries, your thoughts slow, and a single truth blooms in your chest like frost blooming on stone. The wound is closed, but something inside you is not. The fever doesn't roar in all at once. It creeps, it waits. It coils low in your spine and rises behind your eyes in waves. You feel the burn in your blood long before anyone else can see it. When they do, when your breathing changes, when your skin flushes and your body trembles, the healer returns. But she doesn't panic. She knew this was coming. She's seen it before. Because this, more than the gash, more than the break, more than the blood, is what kills. Infection, the invisible killer. You can't see it and neither can she, but she can feel its patterns. Fever that comes after the wound, not before. Redness that spreads. Heat where there should be healing. A foulness to the air around the bandages. The body speaks in warnings, and the healer listens not with eyes but with instinct and memory. There is no name for bacteria in your tongue. There are no microscopes, no petri dishes, no Latin prefixes to catalog the threat. But still they know. They have always known, not what infection is but what it does, how it behaves, how it hides, how it kills. So the healer begins to fight it. Not with scalpel or syringe, but with what she knows. Fermented moss scraped from the edge of the meat pit, left to rot just long enough to sprout the green fuzz she calls moon fur. Moldy, acrid smelling and bitter on the tongue. She scrapes it into a paste and smears it across the wound line where the tendon threads the skin. You wince as it touches flesh that has already screamed too many times, but she does not stop. She pushes the mixture deep into every crevice, filling the stitch holes and sealing the edge in a soft, reeking poultice. You wonder if she's poisoning you. It smells like death. But the pain doesn't rise, it softens. The wound does not redden more, it pales. And over the next day, the fever shifts, no longer rising, no longer biting your brain with the teeth of confusion and fire. Could it be working? Thousands of years later, someone will ask the same question in a different voice. Did ancient people stumble on antibiotics before science did? Did they find in the wet rot of soil and food the miracle of penicillin? Not through sterile laboratories or theoretical models, but through something older: decay, trial, death, observation, survival. Evidence will rise in fragments, traces of penicillium in Neanderthal dental calculus, microbial remnants in preserved poultices, burial sites showing signs of infection, but also healing. The line between accident and innovation will blur. Because maybe they didn't just stumble, maybe they watched. They saw wounds packed with mold that healed better than those left clean. They tasted bark and found the bitterness numbed the tongue and cooled the skin. They noticed that snow held swelling down, that certain soils smothered rot, that honey slowed the stink of decay. They passed those patterns on, voice to voice, hand to hand. You drink something bitter. The healer pinches your nose to force it down. It burns your throat and makes your stomach churn, but afterward your breath steadies. The brew is made of willow bark and crushed garlic steeped in warm water. The bark holds salicin, kin to aspirin. The garlic allicin, a compound known to kill microbes. She doesn't know those names, but she knows the signs. Knows when it works and when it doesn't. She wraps your body in hides, layers soaked in herbal steam. Sweat pours from you as the fever peaks. She wipes it away with strips of moss, changes the wraps again and again. With each new layer, the smell of rot fades a little more. You slip in and out of awareness, not knowing what day it is. Time becomes a rhythm of pain and relief, heat and cold, sleep and the sound of fire crackling through the silence. Sometimes you hear her speaking, not to you but to the wound, words of warning or maybe negotiation. The line between spirit and sickness is thin here. Even now, there's no separation between medicine and magic. Each action is both ritual and remedy. not because they don't know what they're doing, but because they do. She leaves out food laced with bitter root for others in the camp, not just for healing but for prevention. Infection travels not only through wounds but through water, waste, air. This, too, she understands without knowing why. The sick are kept separate. Hands are rinsed in hot ash water. Tools are burned after use. You do not have germ theory, but you do have memory, and memory protects. You're still burning, but your eyes are clearer. The healer watches you from the corner of the cave, not smiling, not yet, but her shoulders are less tense, her hands no longer hover. She believes your body has begun to win. The paste has set. The swelling has stopped growing. The breath you draw is full, not ragged. She peels back the bandage. No pus, no streaks of angry red. She nods once and presses her hand to your forehead. It's still warm but not hot. The invisible killer has not taken you. Not this time. Later, when the fire dies low and only the wind moves outside the cave, she will clean the wound again. Replace the moss. Check the stitches. Say nothing still. But in her silence will live a kind of reverence, not for the gods, not for herself, but for the truth. The wild is not only a threat, it is also a pharmacy. And the line between death and survival has always been drawn by those who knew how to listen, not just to words, but to the body, to the earth, to the ancient language of decay and healing, rot and rebirth. You drift into sleep, the fever receding like a tide. But another test is coming. The wound is closed, the infection has stalled. Now the real healing must begin. And healing in the Ice Age is never just physical. You wake to silence, not the hush of sleep, but the stillness of worry. You don't hear the healer's soft breathing or the rustle of hides. Only the wind and the fire and the faint sound of your own body unraveling. Your leg is heavy, too heavy, and cold, not the kind of cold the cave can warm. The skin has turned a deep, sick gray, and the smell, something like wet ash and meat gone bad, clings to the air, thick and unignorable. You don't remember when the pain stopped. That, too, is a sign. When pain disappears too soon, it doesn't mean the body is healing. It means part of it has already died. And sometimes there's no coming back. The healer crouches nearby, not touching you yet. Her eyes are low and her lips move without sound. A prayer, a memory, or just her way of holding back the grief that everyone else is starting to feel. This isn't just a wound anymore. It's a turning point. Sometimes healing fails. You're not the first. Burial pits in the earth will tell the stories long after the voices are gone. People with infected limbs, shattered skulls, arrowheads still lodged in ribs, teeth rotted to the root, bone thinned by fever and famine. And still, sometimes even among those who suffered most, there is evidence of care, of effort, of love. But care does not always mean survival. And in those moments, when the healer's knowledge ends, another kind of medicine begins. They bring the smoke, a small fire of sage and pine resin, not for warmth but for scent, purification. You aren't sure if it's for your body or your spirit, maybe both. You taste it as it fills the cave, sweet and bitter like something burned in offering. They light the fat-soaked wick. Someone begins to sing, not loudly, not like a chant, but low and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Spiritual medicine isn't superstition. It's grief made into ritual. It's love turned into rhythm. When the healer cannot save the body, the tribe gathers to protect the soul. They touch you with painted fingers. They whisper words into your ear that sound older than language. They leave carved figures at the mouth of the cave, offerings to whatever waits in the snow beyond life. These are not acts of desperation. They are acts of meaning. Because even when the body breaks beyond repair, the story of you does not end. But sometimes, just sometimes, they do not accept the failure, not fully. Sometimes they try one final thing. The healer lifts your fur coverings, examines the dead flesh. She traces your thigh with her fingers, not gently but with intent, measuring, deciding. She nods to the others. They're going to try to take your leg. Amputation, the final brutal hope. It sounds modern, it is. It sounds surgical, it's not, but it is real. Evidence of amputations from the Ice Age exists. A child in Borneo missing a lower leg and surviving years after. An arm gone from the elbow down, bones smoothed at the end with signs of regrowth and repair. Not accidents, not punishment, but surgery. Deliberate, skilled. And how did they do it? With obsidian blades sharper than steel, with stone awls and bone wedges, with fire to cauterize, with herbal mixtures to numb the mind and slow the blood. They didn't have anesthesia, but they had trance. They had ritual. They had songs that turned pain into rhythm and smoke that dulled the line between waking and dreaming. You feel the sting of the blade long before it touches skin, because your body already knows what's coming. Fear, more than pain, is the true battle. Fear of death, fear of more pain, fear of failure, but also the fragile, flickering hope of one last chance. The others brace you, not to hold you down, but to remind you you're not alone. One hums low and slow. Another presses a carved bone into your hand. You bite down. You don't want to scream. But you do. The cut isn't fast, it's careful. Blood flows, but not in a torrent. The healer moves with practiced rhythm. She's done this before. You fade in and out. Time breaks apart. The pain isn't sharp, it's everywhere like fire in your blood. Then cold, then silence. And when you wake again, the leg is gone. But you are not. The days that follow are fevered, cloudy. You float between dreams and voices, but slowly, breath by breath, you begin to return. The wound doesn't kill you, it seals, it scars, and eventually it becomes part of you. You're not who you were, but you're alive. And in the Ice Age, that matters more than anything. Later they'll craft you a crutch, a carved staff fitted to your height, smoothed with care. You'll walk differently now, hunt differently, sleep closer to the fire, but you'll still be part of the tribe, still needed, still carried in stories. And when others fall wounded in winters to come, they will look at your scar and remember, not every story ends in healing, but every wound leaves a lesson. Sometimes that lesson is about the limits of medicine. Sometimes it's about the power of care. And sometimes it's about what it means to survive anyway. The healer doesn't speak much about what she did. She doesn't boast. But at night, when the fire dies low and the air is still, She glances at your sleeping form and allows herself one breath of relief. You were supposed to die. But you didn't. And that, too, is medicine. You wake not to pain but to quiet. Not the silence of danger or fever or waiting, but something softer. Your breath moves easily now. Your skin no longer burns. The wound itched for weeks, then scabbed, then pulled tight like dried leather. And now, where flesh once split wide open, there's only a line, a ridge, a memory pressed into your skin. You survived. But the hardest part wasn't the blood or the blade. It's this after. The slow, strange task of learning to move again, to live inside a changed body. Each motion tests the limits of your strength, your balance, your will. You try to squat by the fire and your leg trembles. You reach for meat and your shoulder burns. Even laughter hurts in places you didn't know could ache. Healing is not a single moment. It is a series of decisions. To stay, to adapt, to try again when the body says no. You are watched, not pitied, not exactly, but studied. The children mimic your limp. The elders whisper to each other, nodding with expressions that feel like quiet pride. You are becoming something else now. Not just the wounded. You are the one who came back. In Ice Age life, that meant something. Archaeological evidence tells us that injured people weren't simply abandoned. Skeletons show signs of long-term survival after brutal wounds, healed fractures, fused vertebrae, even broken skulls that knitted back together. These people were fed, carried, cared for, because survival wasn't just about the body, it was a group achievement. And that made your scar a symbol. It said, you endured what others might not. You crossed a line few ever do, and returned with something more than just breath. Scars were not hidden, they were shown, touched, sometimes marked further with ochre or carved beads like stitches that continued beyond the flesh into story. Not decorations, declarations, proof of pain overcome, of knowledge earned the hard way. And with that knowledge came a new kind of power. You're no longer sent into the hunt. Not yet, maybe not ever. The cold makes your joints ache. You move slower. But the younger ones listen when you speak. They ask how it felt when the pain hit, what you saw in the firelight, what you remember before the cut. You tell them. Not everything. Some memories are sharp in ways flint can't match, but enough. Enough to make them still. Enough to pass on what was almost lost. In many Ice Age groups, the wounded became guides, advisors, even healers themselves, not because they'd read anything, there was nothing to read, but because they knew. They had been the one on the hide mat, burning with infection. They had smelled their own rot. They had heard the healer's breath falter for just 1 second in the middle of the night. That kind of experience carves deeper than any stone tool ever could. You begin to assist the healer now. Not officially, but your hands are steadier than they used to be. Your eyes catch things others miss, subtle shifts in skin, in color, in breath. You remember what helped and what hurt. You mix herbs with a patience born of necessity. You hum the old chants and the rhythm comes naturally, like walking again after a long frost. One day you notice a boy with a swollen ankle. The others think he's clumsy. You see something else. You touch the skin, it's hot. You press gently and the pain lights his face like a flame. You fetch the healer. She doesn't speak, but her eyes tell you what you already know. And she saw it too. Not all Ice Age survivors became healers, but all became witnesses, carriers of a kind of truth that only the body can teach. You join that lineage, the quiet, unbroken chain of people who walked through fire and returned with something more than flesh. Your role in the tribe changes. You no longer run, but you remember what it was like to run. And that memory, strangely, becomes part of how you lead. You don't envy the strong. You teach them to protect the weak. You remind them that someday they may need the same. Even the hunter who once joked at your slowness now nods when you speak. He asks for your thoughts on a wound that won't clot. He lingers by the fire just a little longer when you start to hum. You didn't ask to become this, but here you are. Scarred alive, a map of survival carved into skin. And one night you run your fingers along the edge of the scar, just a trace, and realize something strange. You don't hate it. You don't love it either, but you understand it. The scar is not just the memory of pain. It's the marker of change, of what was risked and what was saved, of how many hands it took to keep you here. It doesn't erase what was lost, but it honors what was kept. The cave is quiet again, not the silence of fear or fever. The silence of breath and rest and trust. And as the fire fades and the night thickens around you, you whisper something. Not a chant, not a prayer. Just a word, maybe two, soft, meant only for the dark. You survived. And that, in the Ice Age, meant everything. The next morning, someone else in the tribe slips in the snow. Not badly, just enough to bruise, but still they call for you, not the healer. You. And just like that, the long road back is no longer a road at all. It's a circle. You've walked their path, felt the weight of the wound, smelled the moss and smoke, watched your own blood steam in the cold. But now the fire dies down and you lift your gaze. A question burns at the edges of everything you've seen. How do we know? How can anyone claim to speak for people who left no writing, no books, no blueprints? Who vanished tens of thousands of years ago, taking their words, and most of their bodies with them? It starts in the bones. Long after flesh returns to soil, bones remain. They carry stories like tree rings, subtle, layered, patient. A fractured femur that healed cleanly tells us that someone once fell hard and someone else stayed by their side. A skull with a carefully cut hole and no sign of infection suggests a surgery, intentional, not accidental. A fused spine, a shattered wrist, a socket worn smooth from overuse. All of it speaks. But not in plain language. You have to learn how to listen. That's where paleopathology comes in, the study of ancient disease and trauma. It's a discipline built on patience, comparison, and the steady hands of scientists who read a tibia the way others read parchment. They know what infections do to the bone, what healing looks like under a microscope, what death by spear feels like, written in cracked vertebrae. You step into their world now just as you stepped into the healer's hut before. But this one is colder, quieter. There's no chanting here, only gloved hands, stone slabs, and trays of carefully labeled fragments. Some bones are thousands of years old. Some are tens of thousands. They've been pulled from burial sites, from rock shelters, from under layers of ice and earth so thick it took decades just to find them. Yet when they surface, they don't emerge as mysteries, they become maps. One skeleton found in modern-day France, dated to nearly 20,000 years ago, shows a shattered arm that was splinted and healed. The break was brutal, the kind that would render someone useless without care. But they lived, long enough for the bone to knit, long enough to learn to use their other hand. Another in northern Spain had a surgically removed leg cut clean through the femur, an ancient amputation. Not crude, not chaotic, precise, and the person survived. None of this proves intention in the way modern medicine demands, but it suggests something even older than precision: compassion, attention, a refusal to abandon the wounded. And it's not just the bones. Healers left behind more than scars. Tools, awls carved from bone, scrapers of obsidian, tiny flint blades with edges sharp enough to shave a hair. Some were found stained with traces of blood or plant resin. Others bear microscopic striations, evidence of use against soft tissue. These weren't weapons. They were instruments. Alongside them, remnants of medicinal plants. Yarrow with its clotting properties. Willow bark rich in natural salicylates, the ancestor of aspirin. Even certain molds which modern mycologists recognize as antimicrobial. The Ice Age pharmacists didn't have microscopes or molecular models, but they had patterns, generations of trial and error. They saw which herbs numbed pain, which poultices shrank swelling. And they passed those truths on, not in writing, but in whispers, stories, rituals. That's where ethnography enters. Anthropologists today look not just at the past, but at the living echoes of it. Indigenous cultures who still practice traditional medicine rooted in oral tradition. In parts of the Amazon, in Siberia, in Australia's deserts, you'll find plant knowledge passed from grandmother to granddaughter. You'll see wounds cleaned with ash, sealed with spider silk, blessed with chants older than conquest. No, these are not Ice Age societies, but they carry fragments of the same ancestral wisdom. Their healers still speak the language of pain without machines, still treat illness as something to be seen, smelled, tasted, sung through. That continuity matters, because it shows us that medical knowledge doesn't have to be written down to endure. It can survive in hands, in habits, in the way one person teaches another how to feel a fever with the back of a hand, or pack a wound with moss, or whisper comfort in the dark. Sometimes it even survives in myth. Take the story of the healer who spoke with animals, or the one who could hear sickness in dreams. Strip away the poetry and you find early forms of diagnosis, empathy, perhaps even rudimentary psychiatry. They didn't use our words, but their intent was the same: to reduce suffering, to restore balance, to keep each other alive. And then there's the science that stares even deeper. Isotopic analysis, used to determine ancient diets and health. DNA studies, showing inherited conditions and genetic adaptations. CT scans of mummified remains that reveal arterial plaques, healed abscesses, and evidence of childbirth trauma. Each technique brings the past closer, more precise, more human. But none of it matters if we forget the heart of it. Because the point isn't just to know what they did. It's to feel why. They didn't heal because they understood germ theory. They healed because it hurt to watch someone suffer, because survival was a shared burden, because a scarred hunter could still tell stories, because love existed even when language didn't. So when you ask, how do we know what they knew? You're really asking how we can trust memory without text, story without ink, wisdom without data. And the answer is this: because the bones speak, because the tools endure, because the plants still grow in the same wild places, because the scar on your ancestor's arm matches the one on someone's grandfather today, because healing, true healing, isn't a product of civilization. It's older than that. It's human. You've walked with them, bled with them, healed with them. And now, as you stand on the edge of modern science and ancient knowing, you realize you're not looking back. You're looking through a mirror. And what stares back is not just history. It's a part of you. You came here for wounds. You wanted to know how they treated gashes with no hospitals, how they survived breaks without braces, how they fought infection without names for the invisible. You wanted science, mystery, maybe even the thrill of danger at the edge of extinction. But now, standing at the end of their story, it's you who feels exposed. Because what you've uncovered wasn't just ancient medicine. It was something deeper, something harder to quantify, and harder to face. You expected crude guesses, superstition, blind stabs in the dark, but what you found was something far more unsettling. Intelligence, real intelligence, just not the kind you were taught to value. These people didn't have universities. They didn't have microscopes or peer review or sterile gloves. But they could name 50 plants by smell alone. They knew how to stop a bleeding artery with nothing but pressure and ice. They could recognize a fever by scent, tell a fracture by touch, and read a face for pain before a word was spoken. They weren't guessing, they were remembering. Survival demanded it. There was no room for ignorance here, no option to wait for help. If your child was choking, or your partner fell into fire, or your skin split open from frostbite, you didn't call a hotline. You acted. And acting meant knowing, not academically, but bodily. That's the kind of intelligence we've almost forgotten. We praise the cerebral now, the calculative, the algorithmic, the digitally optimized. But your ancestors lived by a different kind of wisdom. They measured knowledge by what could save a life in 5 heartbeats. They trusted intuition not as mysticism, but as data learned in the blood, generation after generation. And here's the twist: much of that knowledge still echoes in you. Think of it. The way your hand jerks back before you register heat. The way your gut clenches before a wound you haven't even seen. The way your body knows how to clot, how to inflame, how to scar, all without permission. These aren't just biological processes. They're ancient agreements, signed in the Ice Age, renewed in every scraped knee, every swollen ankle, every instinct that says move, heal, protect. You've always known more than you think. So when you look at a Paleolithic healer crouched by a wound, muttering under her breath as she binds moss with sinew, don't see someone trapped in a time before reason. See someone who embodies a different kind of reason. Because some of those techniques, they still exist just under new names. Suturing with sinew, that's field surgery. Cauterization with heated stone, a battlefield technique still used when supplies run out. Willow bark, aspirin, fermented mold, penicillin, smoked herbs to calm panic and nausea, aromatherapy now repackaged in sterile bottles. Modern medicine didn't appear from nowhere. It's a river, and the Ice Age sits upstream. Emergency medics, war doctors, survivalists, they all reach for instincts that echo the past. Tourniquets, compresses, triage, stabilization, these are not inventions. They are refinements. And the truth is, in the wild or in war, we revert. We go back to basics, back to breath and bleeding and bones, back to Ice Age wisdom. Because hospitals may fail, machines break, but hands, eyes, memory, those endure. And that raises a deeper question, one you felt building all along. What if they knew things we've forgotten? What if the intelligence of survival wasn't about discovering new truths, but remembering old ones? The kind that don't need translation. The kind you can feel in the way your breath slows near firelight, in the way your body leans toward trees, herbs, touch, in the way pain makes you primitive fast. We think of evolution as escape from the cave, the cold, the wound. But maybe evolution is also return, a spiral, a remembering. Not everything in the past deserves revival. Some wounds did kill. Some rituals brought more harm than good. Let's be clear, reverence is not romanticism. But humility, that's earned. Because healing isn't a timeline, it's a practice. And they practiced it with no margin for error. Their failures were buried, but their successes, your living proof. You carry their victories in your veins, the immunity you didn't choose, the reflexes you didn't invent, the knowledge you don't even realize you know until you need it. And when you do, when you're in a car crash, or miles from help, or looking at someone you love and realizing they might die unless you act, that's when your Ice Age intelligence wakes up. It's not poetic, it's physical. It's in the rush of adrenaline, the tunnel vision, the sudden, wordless clarity, the hands that move before thought, the pressure on the wound, the breath into lungs, the scream that calls others. You become the healer, not by training, by inheritance. You see, healing was never just a science or a ceremony. It was a way of staying human. It was proof that we weren't just animals ripping meat and chasing fire. It was care. It was us. So yes, you came here for wounds. But what you found was wisdom, not trapped in textbooks or temples, but burned into bones, pressed into hands, and still pulsing quietly inside you. This is what the Ice Age knew. That the body breaks, that the body mends, that we are born with fire inside us, not just to burn but to warm, to guide, to heal, and that in the coldest, most brutal chapters of our species, what saved us wasn't just strength. It was each other. You survived. And not because you were lucky. Because you remembered how. And now that memory is yours to carry, to honor, to pass on. Because deep down, your body has always known. You were never primitive. You were prepared.